Before you trust your thoughts again, stop for a moment. What if the voice inside your head, the one you've been listening to your entire life, is not telling you the truth? What if it's quietly shaping your fears, replaying your past, and convincing you that your worst moments define you? Because the most dangerous lie is the one that sounds like your own voice. There's a voice that never stops speaking. It shows up in silence. It replays your mistakes. It takes small failures and makes them feel personal. And it speaks with so much certainty that questioning it doesn't even cross your mind. Over time, it becomes familiar. And what is familiar begins to feel true. Not because it is true, but because you've heard it so many times that it no longer feels like a thought. It feels like reality.
Welcome to True Stoic Journal, the path to inner control.
You've experienced this. Nothing is happening, yet your mind won't stop. It brings back something you said, something you did, something you wish you could undo. And instead of letting it pass, you stay there. You replay it. You relive it. You reanalyze every detail. But it doesn't just remind you. It judges you. It adds weight. It turns a simple moment into something permanent. And the most unsettling part is, you don't argue with it. You agree with it. But this is where most people misunderstand their own mind. Because what feels like truth is often just repetition. The Stoics saw something most people never notice. They believe that we are not disturbed by what happens, but by what we think about what happens. That changes everything. Because it means, the voice in your head is not an authority. It's a narrator. And like any narrator, it can exaggerate, distort, and misinterpret. The real danger is not that the voice exists. The real danger is that you've been treating it as if it's always right. Think about a moment you regret. Not something dramatic. Just something small, but personal. Maybe you said something awkward. Maybe you delayed something important. Maybe you didn't act the way you wanted to. The moment passed. But your mind didn't. It stayed there. It replayed it, again and again, until the memory started to change. Because here's what your mind does. It doesn't just remember events. It reconstructs them. It edits them. It adds meaning to them. What started as something small, becomes something heavy. Something emotional. Something personal. Something that feels like proof. As if that one moment revealed something permanent about who you are. But that meaning wasn't there in the moment. Your mind created it. A small mistake becomes a reflection of your intelligence. A missed opportunity becomes a reflection of your worth. A moment of hesitation becomes a reflection of your character. Not because it's true, but because your mind needed an explanation. And instead of staying neutral, it chose the harshest one. And once that meaning is attached, it sticks. You don't just remember what happened. You remember what you decided it meant about you. This is how identity quietly forms. Not from reality, but from repeated interpretation. The Stoics understood this deeply. They saw how quickly the mind moves from observation to judgment. One moment you notice something. The next moment, you define it. And once you define it, it begins to define you. Your mood shifts. Your confidence drops. Your actions change. All from a single thought that you never questioned. And that's why these thoughts feel so convincing. Because they don't arrive as suggestions. They arrive as conclusions. Your mind doesn't say, this might mean something. It says, this is what it means. And because it sounds like you trust it. But here's where everything begins to change. The moment you realize that this voice is interpretation, not truth, you create distance. It's small at first. Almost unnoticeable. But it's powerful. Because now, you are no longer inside the thought. You are looking at it. And that changes your position completely. Because when you observe a thought, you are no longer controlled by it. Now something new becomes possible. Instead of reacting, you pause. Instead of believing, you question. Instead of identifying, you separate. And in that space, control begins. The thought doesn't disappear. The voice doesn't go silent. But something important happens. It loses its authority. You begin to see it for what it is, a mental process. Not a verdict. This is where real discipline begins. Not by forcing your thoughts to stop, but by refusing to follow them blindly. The Stoics never tried to silence the mind. They trained themselves to understand it. Because peace doesn't come from having no thoughts. It comes from not being ruled by them. So now, when a thought appears, you don't immediately obey it. You examine it. You ask, is this useful? Is this accurate? Is this helping me move forward? And sometimes, you simply let it pass. Because not every thought deserves your attention. And not every thought deserves your belief. Over time, this changes everything. The voice in your head still speaks. It still brings memories. It still creates interpretations. But now, it no longer controls your direction. It becomes something you can listen to, without obeying. And this is where your real power begins. Because now you understand something most people never realize: you cannot control every thought that appears. But you can control what you do with it. You can accept it. You can question it. Or you can let it go. And that choice, repeated daily, reshapes your entire life. What once felt overwhelming, becomes manageable. What once felt like truth, becomes just a possibility. What once controlled you, loses its grip. And slowly, a quiet kind of confidence begins to form. Not loud. Not forced. But stable. Because now you know, even if the voice becomes harsh, even if old patterns return, you are no longer trapped inside them. You can step back. You can observe. You can choose. This is the difference between reacting and living with awareness. Between being controlled and being in control. Because in the end, the voice in your head was never your enemy. It was a tool you were never taught how to use. And the moment you stop believing every thought, you start becoming someone who can direct their life, instead of reacting to it. That's where real strength begins. Quiet. Steady. And completely under your control. If this made you see your thoughts differently, don't stop here. Subscribe to True Stoic Journal and start mastering the one thing most people never do, their own mind. And if this resonated with you, share it with someone who needs this clarity today.